I am Eliza Carter, 30 years old, and my family chose a steak dinner over watching me receive an Air Force Achievement Medal. Before I tell you about the broadcast that changed everything and left my father speechless in the middle of a crowded restaurant, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love hearing from you all. I was sitting in my car, the engine off, parked just outside the massive hangar on base where the ceremony was about to begin. The interior of the car was dark, save for the bluish glow of my phone screen. I was wearing my dress blues. The fabric was stiff, the silver insignias on my flight cap caught the dim light, and my shoes were polished to a mirror shine. I looked the part of a staff sergeant in the United States Air Force. I felt like a professional. But looking at the family group chat, I felt like that little girl back in Ohio again, the one who was always told to move out of the way so her sister could be seen. The messages were right there, etched into the digital history of my family's indifference. I had sent the invitation 2 weeks ago. I didn't ask for a parade. I didn't ask for a party. I just said, "Hey everyone, I'm being recognized at a formal awards banquet next Friday. It's a commander's call and families are invited. I'd really like it if you could come." I remember waiting for the bubbles to appear. I thought, maybe this time. Maybe now that I'm 30, now that I've served 2 tours and managed complex operations that keep this wing flying, they might see me. Rachel, my older sister, replied first. She always does. "Isn't that just an internal thing like admin work?" she wrote, followed by a laughing emoji. "We already have dinner plans that night, at that new Italian place Dad loves. Don't be mad." Then came my father, Richard. "Awards banquet for what? You're not an officer, Eliza. Sounds like a secretary award if you ask me. If it was something real, they'd put it in the paper." And finally, my mother, Linda. She didn't type a word. She just tapped the little thumbs up icon under Rachel's message about dinner. I sat there in the silence of the parking lot, staring at that thumbs up. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a door slamming shut. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white against the black leather. My throat felt tight, that familiar ache of being minimized by the people who were supposed to be my biggest fans. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I saw a woman who had spent years coordinating timelines, managing information flow, and ensuring that decision-makers had exactly what they needed when lives were on the line. My AFSC is 3D0X1, Knowledge Operations. To my father that meant paperwork. To the Air Force it meant the difference between a mission succeeding or a disaster unfolding. A sharp rap on the window made me jump. It was Theota Sarah Miller, my commanding officer. She was already in her full ceremonial uniform, looking sharp and commanding. I rolled down the window, the cool evening air rushing in. "Sergeant Carter. You okay?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. She was one of the few people who knew I'd invited my family. She'd even helped me ensure there were enough seats reserved at the front table. "I'm fine, ma'am," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Just taking a moment." She looked at the empty passenger seat, then back at me. She didn't ask where they were. She didn't have to. "We're about to start, Eliza. Your unit is waiting." "I'm waiting. You earned this. Don't let anything take that away from you tonight." "Thank you, ma'am," I replied. I stepped out of the car. My heels clicked on the pavement, a sharp, disciplined sound. I straightened my jacket, ensuring my ribbons were perfectly aligned. I had spent the last hour meticulously prepping, smoothing every crease, making sure I was flawless. Not for them anymore. For me. As I walked toward the hangar, I saw other families arriving. I saw fathers patting their sons on the back, mothers wiping tears of pride, sisters hugging brothers. I walked past them, my head held high, looking straight ahead. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was a professional, and I didn't need a cheering section to do my job. But as I reached the door, I felt a vibration in my pocket. A new message. I shouldn't have looked. It was Rachel again. A photo of a wine glass and a plate of expensive-looking calamari. Thinking of you. Wish you were here, the breadsticks are amazing. I didn't reply. I turned off the phone and handed it to Marcus, my teammate who was working the door. Hold this for me, will you? I don't want any distractions. You got it, Eliza, Marcus said, giving me a supportive nod. Hey, you look great. You're going to crush it. I walked into the hangar. The smell of jet fuel and floor wax was strangely comforting. The flags were at attention, the stage was set, and the hum of 100 voices filled the air. I took my seat at the very front, right next to the empty chairs I had reserved. I sat there, looking at those empty seats. They were a physical manifestation of a lifetime of being overlooked. But as the lights dimmed and the color guard began to march, a new feeling started to settle in my chest. It wasn't the usual sadness. It was a cold, hard clarity. They thought this was small. They thought I was just a lowly secretary. They had no idea that tonight, for the first time, the world was going to see exactly what I did. And they were going to see it because someone else, someone who actually valued my work, was going to tell the story. I didn't know then that the ceremony was being live-streamed. I didn't know that a distant cousin back home would stumble upon it and share it. I didn't know that while they were laughing over pasta, the reality of my life was about to invade their pockets. I smiled to myself as the national anthem began to play. I stood at attention, hand over my heart, feeling the weight of the medal I hadn't even received yet. They thought they could ignore me. But I was about to become impossible to ignore. To understand why that empty chair hurt so much, you have to understand the house I grew up in back in Ohio. It was a nice house, white siding, manicured lawn, the kind of place that looked perfect from the sidewalk. But inside, there was a hierarchy as rigid as any military chain of command, and I was firmly at the bottom. My sister Rachel was the golden child. She was 3 years older, louder, and had this way of sucking the oxygen out of every room she entered. If Rachel got a B on a test, it was a tragedy that required a family meeting. If I won a state-level academic competition, it was nice, honey, now pass the salt. I remember being 11 years old. I had worked for months on a project about logistics in the Civil War. I won first place in the county. I came home clutching that blue ribbon and the gold embossed certificate like they were holy relics. I remember the smell of the gym where I received it, popcorn and floor wax. I thought, surely, this is the one. This is the moment they put something of mine on the fridge. I walked into the kitchen. My father, Richard, was leaning against the counter, looking at a brochure for a new Porsche he wanted to buy. He didn't even look up. Dad, look. I won first place, I said, holding out the certificate. He glanced at it for maybe half a second. Good job, Eliza, he said, his voice flat. Then he turned the page of his brochure. Linda, did you see the specs on this 911? That's real engineering. My mother, Linda, smiled at me, but it was that distracted smile she always gave when she was trying to keep the peace. That's wonderful, Eliza. Are you hungry? I made chicken. Rachel walked in then, complaining that her hair straightener was broken. Immediately, the conversation shifted. The engineering of the Porsche was forgotten, my blue ribbon was forgotten, and the next 20 minutes were spent discussing where to buy the best hair tools in the city. I watched my father take my certificate. He didn't hang it up. He walked over to the hallway and opened the drawer. Every house has one. The junk drawer. But ours was different. It was where my life went to die. He slid my first place win in among expired warranties, spare AA batteries, and instruction manuals for a toaster we'd thrown away 3 years ago. He closed the drawer with a click that sounded like a final judgment. If it matters, people will know about it, he used to say. To him, mattering meant visibility. It meant status. It meant being a CEO or a lawyer or someone whose name was on a building. Support roles, quiet competence, the people who made the world actually turn. They were invisible to him. As I grew older, I stopped trying to compete with Rachel's noise. I became low maintenance. My parents used that word like a compliment, but I knew what it really meant. You don't require much attention, so we don't have to give you any. When I told them I was joining the Air Force, the reaction was exactly what I expected. We were sitting at the dinner table, the same table where they would later sit without me. I've signed the papers, I said quietly. I'm leaving for basic training in 3 weeks. Rachel actually laughed. Camouflage? Really, Eliza? You're already so good at disappearing, I figured you'd just join the witness protection program. My mother frowned. It's so dangerous, honey. Why can't you just go to the community college and find a nice office job? My father didn't even stop eating his steak. It's not a career, Eliza. It's a stopgap. It's what people do when they don't have a plan. You'll be over there doing paperwork for 4 years, and then you'll come back and have to start your real life. It's a waste of time. I didn't argue. I had learned that arguing with them was like trying to punch a cloud. Instead, I just nodded. I didn't tell them that I was joining because I wanted to be somewhere where the rules were the same for everyone. Where if I did a good job, a computer or a sergeant would record it, and it wouldn't matter if I was loud or quiet. Basic training was a shock, but in a way, I loved it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Eliza the quiet one. I was Airman Carter. My performance mattered. If my locker wasn't perfect, I was corrected. If my runtime improved, it was noted. There were no drawers in the Air Force. Everything was on the record. I remember sending my graduation photo home. I was standing tall, my uniform crisp, my eyes clear. My mother called me. I received the photo, dear, she said. I put it somewhere safe. Right in the hallway. When I went home on leave 6 months later, I looked for it. It wasn't in the living room with Rachel's graduation photos. It wasn't on the mantel. It was on a small shelf in the hallway, tucked behind a vase of silk flowers. It was safe, all right. Safe from being seen. My father introduced me to the neighbors that weekend. This is Eliza. She's in the military. Doing the support side of things, you know. Keeping the printers running. He said it with a smirk, like my service was a cute little hobby I'd picked up. I wanted to tell him about the 12-hour shifts I'd been working. I wanted to tell him about the responsibility of managing data that influenced flight schedules for an entire squadron. But I looked at him, and I saw the man who had slid my blue ribbon into a drawer of junk. I realized then that there was no language I could speak that he would understand. He didn't value the foundation, he only valued the spire. I went back to base and I stopped calling as much. I stopped sending photos. I stopped expecting them to understand. I poured myself into my work. I earned my promotions. I made staff sergeant ahead of my peers. My salary was good, my benefits were great, and for the first time in my life, I had a savings account that didn't rely on anyone else's approval. But even then, a small, stubborn part of me, the 11-year-old girl with the Civil War project, still wanted them to see. That's why I sent the invite. I thought a formal banquet, a medal, a commander in a suit, maybe that would be enough for them to realize I wasn't just keeping the printers running. I was wrong. They chose the breadsticks. As I sat in that hangar, listening to the opening remarks, I realized that I had been trying to translate my worth for people who refused to learn the vocabulary. I was done being a translator. Tonight, I was just going to be Eliza Carter. And if they weren't there to see it, that was their loss. I didn't know yet that the loss was going to be much more public than they ever imagined. The Air Force has a way of testing you when you least expect it. My family thought my job was paperwork, but they didn't understand what that paperwork represented. In the military, information is a weapon. If the right person doesn't have the right data, at the right second people die. 3 months before the awards ceremony, our base was the hub for a massive humanitarian relief operation. A Category 4 hurricane had devastated the coast, and we were the primary launch point for search and rescue teams and supplies. The hangar was a beehive of activity. Helicopters were taking off every 20 minutes. Cargo planes were being loaded with pallets of water and medical supplies. It was chaos, but it was organized chaos. And I was at the center of the organization. As a knowledge operations specialist, my job was to ensure that the flow of information between the civil authorities, the National Guard, and our active duty units didn't break down. I was managing the digital timelines, tracking the status of every aircraft, and coordinating with the medical teams on the ground. For 48 hours, I didn't sleep. I lived on burnt coffee and adrenaline. I was in a room filled with monitors, phones ringing off the hook, and commanders shouting for updates. At one point, a search and rescue team was stranded. They had found a group of 200 people trapped on a roof, but the coordinates they'd sent through were conflicting with the weather data. The mission was about to be scrubbed because of the risk to the crew. Carter. We need a clear path for the Jolly 11. Where are the updated wind speeds for Sector 4? Tom Miller yelled across the room. I didn't panic. I couldn't. I had been tracking the sensor data from 3 different sources. I saw the discrepancy. It wasn't a weather change, it was a sensor malfunction at the civilian airport. Ma'am, the airport sensor is ghosting. Use the data from the base weather station, offset by 4 degrees. The corridor is open but only for the next 15 minutes, I shouted back, my fingers flying across the keyboard to push the data to the pilot's cockpit. Miller didn't hesitate. You heard her. Jolly 11, you are cleared for Sector 4. Follow the Carter corridor. They made it. 200 people were airlifted off that roof because I knew which piece of paperwork to trust. When the mission was over, I was exhausted, covered in sweat and grease, my eyes bloodshot. I went back to my dorm, showered and checked my phone. I had a message from my father. Hey, Rachel got a promotion today. Senior VP of Marketing. We're taking her out for lobster. Hope your office isn't too boring today. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried. Not because I was sad, but because the disconnect was so profound it was almost absurd. I had just helped save 200 lives, and my father was bragging about Rachel's new title and a lobster dinner. I didn't tell him. I knew what he'd say. That's nice, Eliza, but did you get a raise? What's your title again? That quarter, Tom Miller submitted me for the Air Force Achievement Medal. It's a significant award for a staff sergeant. It requires a detailed justification, a citation that explains exactly what you did and why it mattered. Miller didn't hold back. She wrote about the Carter corridor. She wrote about the 48 hours of selfless service. She wrote about the lives saved. The package went up the chain of command. It was approved at the squadron level. Then the group level. Finally, the wing commander himself signed off on it. When Miller called me into her office to tell me, she didn't just give me a memo. She stood up and shook my hand. This is well deserved, Eliza. You were the backbone of that operation. I want you to invite your family to the banquet. This isn't just a certificate, it's a recognition of who you are as a leader. That was the moment I decided to try one last time. I thought, if they hear the citation, if they hear a major and a colonel talking about what I did, they'll have to see it. They won't be able to hide it in a drawer. So I sent the text. And I got the thumbs up from my mom and the secretary comment from my dad. The week leading up to the ceremony was hard. Every time I saw a family member of another airman on base, I felt a pang of jealousy. I saw Marcus helping his dad find the dry cleaners for his suit. I saw another sergeant showing her parents around the flight line. I spent my evenings alone, polishing my shoes until I could see the disappointment in my own reflection. I practiced my walk to the stage. I practiced my salute. I was going to be perfect. But as the day approached, the anger started to replace the sadness. I realized that my family's dismissal wasn't about me. It was about their own narrow vision of success. They were so focused on the golden child and her marketing titles that they couldn't see the hero standing right in front of them. The night before the ceremony, I went to the grocery store. I bought a single steak and a bottle of decent wine. I cooked it for myself. I sat at my small kitchen table, the medal sitting in its velvet box next to my plate. I looked at it. It was beautiful. The silver medal, the blue and white ribbon. It represented the best of me. To Eliza I said, lifting my glass to the empty room. Because you know what you did. I went to bed early but I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about the Carter corridor. I kept thinking about those 200 people. They didn't know my name, but they were alive because of me. And then I thought about my father, Richard, probably at some bar right now, bragging about Rachel's promotion to anyone who would listen. Wait until tomorrow, Dad, I whispered into the dark. Wait until the broadcast starts. I still didn't realize the full scale of what was about to happen. I thought the ceremony would just be for the people in the room. I had no idea the Air Force Public Affairs team was planning to use my story as the centerpiece of their annual Year in Review video, which was being live-streamed to over 50,000 followers. The stage was set. The storm was coming. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one managing the flow of information. I was going to be the information itself. The morning of the ceremony was cold and crisp. I woke up at 0500, long before the sun had even thought about touching the horizon. The bass was quiet, that deep, humming silence that you only find on a military installation in the early hours. I went through my routine with mechanical precision. I didn't want to think, I just wanted to do. Every movement was a way to ground myself. I spent an hour on my uniform. I used a ruler to make sure my ribbons were exactly 1/8 of an inch above my pocket. I lint-rolled my jacket 4 times. I checked the alignment of my rank insignias until my eyes hurt. This was my armor. When I wore this uniform, I wasn't the unimportant daughter. I was a non-commissioned officer. I was a professional. I drove to work and spent the day doing what I do best, managing chaos. We had a VIP visit scheduled for the following week, and the logistics were a nightmare. I spent 8 hours on the phone, coordinating flight times, security clearances, and lodging. My coworkers knew it was my big night. Marcus kept trying to cheer me up. Hey, Eliza, I heard the wing commander is going to personally mention the relief op during the keynote. That's huge. I just nodded and kept typing. It's just part of the job, Marcus. No, it isn't, he said, leaning over my desk. Most people would be shouting this from the rooftops. Why are you being so quiet about it? Because the people I want to hear it aren't listening, I said, finally looking up. Marcus stayed quiet for a second. He knew about the group chat. He'd seen me staring at my phone earlier in the week. Their loss, Eliza. Seriously. If they can't see what everyone else on this base sees, that's a defect in them, not you. I know, I said. But knowing it and feeling it were 2 different things. By 1600, I was back at my apartment, getting ready for the actual event. I put on the dress blues for the second time that day. I looked at the empty apartment. No one was there to tell me I looked sharp. No one was there to help me with the tricky clasp on my necklace. I sat on the couch for a moment, my hands resting on my knees. I thought about calling my mom. Just one last check. Hey, are you sure you can't make it? It's only a 2-hour drive. But I knew the answer. She'd give me that soft, apologetic voice. Oh, Eliza, you know how your father is. He's already made the reservation, and Rachel is so excited to celebrate her promotion. We'll see you at Christmas, okay? I didn't call. I didn't want to hear the apology. I didn't want to be the afterthought anymore. I drove to the base. The parking lot was starting to fill up. I saw the SUVs and minivans, the families spilling out, laughing and talking. I saw a little boy wearing a miniature pilot's suit, holding his father's hand. I felt a wave of nausea. I almost turned the car around. I almost went back home, changed into my pajamas, and disappeared into a movie. But then I thought about Thutah Miller. I thought about the Carter corridor. I thought about the 200 people who were alive because I didn't disappear when things got hard. I straightened my spine. I checked my reflection. I looked like a leader. I walked into the hangar. The space had been transformed. There were white linens on the tables, a professional sound system, and a massive screen behind the stage. The Air Force band was playing low, jazz-inspired versions of military marches. I found my table. Table 1. Right in front of the podium. There were 5 chairs. My name was on one. The other 4 were empty. I sat down. Marcus was at table 3, and he gave me a thumbs up. Miller was at the head table with the other officers, but she caught my eye and nodded. I felt like I was under a spotlight in an empty room. People kept walking by, glancing at the empty chairs, then at me. I could see the pity in their eyes. Poor Sergeant Carter. No one came for her. I hated that pity. I didn't want to be a victim. I wanted to be a staff sergeant. The ceremony began. The posting of the colors, the invocation, the dinner. The food was good, but I couldn't taste it. I was just waiting for the moment. Around 1900, the wing commander, Colonel Henderson, stood up at the podium. He was a tall man with a chest full of medals and a voice that commanded respect. Tonight, we recognize excellence, he began. But more than that, we recognize the invisible threads that hold this wing together. We often talk about the pilots, the point of the spear. But a spear is useless without the shaft, without the hand that guides it, and without the intelligence that tells it where to strike. He paused, and the screen behind him flickered to life. It wasn't just a slide with my name. It was a video. The public affairs team had gone all out. They had footage from the hurricane relief, the rain, the helicopters, the desperate faces on the roofs. And then, there was audio. It was the recording from the command center. Carter. We need a clear path. Jolly 11 is in trouble. And then, my voice. Ma'am, the airport sensor is ghosting. Use the base weather station, follow the Carter corridor. The room went dead silent. Everyone stopped eating. They were watching the screen as it showed the Jolly 11 helicopter hovering over the roof, pulling people to safety, one by one. The caption on the screen read, Staff Sergeant Eliza Carter, the architect of the Carter corridor. Colonel Henderson looked directly at me. Sergeant Carter, please come to the stage. I stood up. I didn't feel small anymore. I felt like I was 10 feet tall. I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking on the floor. The applause started small, then it grew into a roar. As I reached the stairs, I noticed something. A cameraman was right in front of me, his red light on. He was filming for the live stream. At that exact moment, 300 miles away, a notification popped up on a phone sitting on a white tablecloth at a high-end Italian restaurant. The storm had arrived. While I was standing on that stage, feeling the cool weight of the Air Force Achievement Medal being pinned to my chest, my family was 3 courses into their celebration of Rachel's promotion. They were at Vittorio's, the kind of place where the waiters wear white gloves, and you have to book a table a month in advance. My father, Richard, was in his element, holding court, talking loudly about real success and market dominance. To Rachel, he said, raising a glass of expensive Barolo. The only Carter who really knows how to climb a ladder. Senior VP at 33. That's what I call a career. My mother, Linda, smiled and clinked her glass. Rachel leaned back, soaking it in, her eyes shining with the smug satisfaction she'd carried since high school. Thanks, Dad, Rachel said. It wasn't easy, but I guess I just have that drive Eliza lacks. I'm just glad I didn't settle for a desk job in a uniform. They all laughed. It was a comfortable, familiar scene. The golden child was shining, and the disappointment was 300 miles away, doing whatever paperwork she did. But then, George, my father's brother, a man who had always been a bit of a tech geek, checked his phone. George wasn't at the dinner. He was at home, scrolling through Facebook. He followed a few military pages because he'd served in the Guard years ago. Suddenly, a live stream popped up. United States Air Force 88th Air Base win quarterly awards. He almost scrolled past it, but then he heard a name. Eliza Carter. He watched, his eyes widening as the video of the hurricane relief played. He saw the Carter Corridor graphics. He heard the colonel calling his niece a hero. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the link and sent it to the family group chat. He didn't even add a caption. He just hit send. Back at Vittorio's, the phones on the table buzzed simultaneously. Rachel was the first to look. She expected it to be a congratulatory text from a coworker. She saw the link from Uncle George. What's George sending links for now? She muttered, tapping the screen. The video opened. The volume was low, but the image was unmistakable. There was Eliza. Not lowly secretary Eliza. Not disappearing Eliza. This Eliza was on a massive screen in a room full of hundreds of people. She was in a uniform that looked like it cost a fortune, her posture perfect, her face a mask of disciplined pride. And then the audio started. Directly responsible for the survival of 200 civilians, the Carter Corridor, Rachel's smile vanished. She felt a cold pit form in her stomach. She looked at the screen, then at the empty seat next to her where Eliza should have been. Dad, she whispered, her voice trembling. Look at this. Richard took the phone, his brow furrowed. What is it? George probably sent another political rant. He looked at the screen. He saw the colonel pinning the medal on his daughter's chest. He heard the applause, a thunderous, genuine sound that made the restaurant's quiet jazz seem pathetic. He saw the caption, Eliza Carter saving lives through precision. The restaurant around them seemed to fade away. The smell of the expensive pasta, the taste of the wine, it all turned to ash. A woman at the next table, who had been glancing at them because of their loud talking earlier, leaned over. She had seen the phone screen. Is that your daughter? She asked, her voice filled with genuine awe. I'm a retired commander. That medal, that's a huge deal. What she did during that hurricane, we were all talking about it in the vets groups. She's a hero. Richard couldn't speak. He stared at the woman, then back at the phone. He looked at the video again. He saw Eliza saluting the colonel. He saw the respect in the officer's eyes, the kind of respect Richard had spent his whole life trying to buy with Porsches and country club memberships. And he realized he didn't have it. But his unimportant daughter did. My mother, Linda, took the phone next. She watched the part where Eliza walked back to her table. The camera panned across the room, and for a split second it caught the front table. Table 1. 4 empty chairs. Linda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked at the white linens of the restaurant table, then back at the empty chairs on the screen. The contrast was a physical blow. We're at dinner, she whispered. She's there and we're here. Rachel felt the spotlight shift. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the center of attention. Even here, at her own promotion dinner, she felt small. She looked at her sister on the screen, and felt a surge of something she'd never felt before, shame. Why didn't she tell us it was like this? Rachel snapped, her voice high and defensive. She just said awards banquet. She didn't say it was this. She told us, Linda said, her voice cracking. She sent the invite. We just didn't listen. Richard sat back in his chair, his face pale. He looked at his hands. He thought about the drawer. He thought about the Civil War project. He thought about every time he'd introduced her as the support side. He felt a vibration in his own pocket. It was a text from his boss, the CEO of the company. Richard. Just saw the Air Force live stream. Is that your Eliza? My God, man, why didn't you say anything? We're all watching it here at the club. You must be the proudest father in the world. Saving 200 lives. Bring her by the office when she's on leave. I want to meet a real hero. Richard looked at the text. He looked at the lowly secretary he'd mocked a week ago. He looked at the wine glass in his hand. It felt heavy. It felt like an indictment. He didn't answer the text. He couldn't. Back at the hangar, I was sitting down at my table. I felt a sense of peace I'd never known. I didn't know about the CEO's text. I didn't know about the woman at the next table. I just knew that I had done my job. And for the first time, I didn't care if they saw it or not. But they were seeing it. They were seeing every second of it. And the broadcast was just beginning. The ceremony ended around 2100. I stayed for a while, talking to my unit, accepting handshakes from people I barely knew. It felt good. It felt like I belonged somewhere. But eventually, the hangar began to empty. The lights were dimmed, and the janitorial crew started moving the tables. I walked out to my car, the medal still pinned to my chest. I sat in the driver's seat, and finally pulled my phone out of the glove box. It was like an explosion. 52 missed calls. Over 100 messages. I didn't even know where to start. My heart started to race, but it wasn't the old anxiety. It was a strange, detached curiosity. The first message was from my mother. Eliza, we saw the video. Why didn't you tell us? We're so confused. I didn't reply. The next was from Rachel. Someone tagged me in that video. People are asking why I'm not there. You made me look like a jerk, Eliza. Why didn't you explain better what this was? I felt a cold laugh bubble up in my throat. I made her look like a jerk. I looked at the photo she'd sent earlier of the breadsticks. I deleted it. Then, there was my father. Eliza, call me immediately. Your Uncle George sent a link. We're still at the restaurant. Everyone is talking about it. Why was the colonel saying those things? You never mentioned a hurricane. I put the phone down on the passenger seat. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just sat there in the dark parking lot, watching the moonlight hit the silver of my medal. I drove home in silence. When I got to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on the edge of my bed. The phone buzzed again. It was a call from my father. I watched it ring. Richard Carter. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, the text came. We looked foolish tonight, Eliza. My boss texted me. People at the club are asking questions. You should have been clearer about the importance of this event. We would have come if we knew it was a medal for saving lives. There it was. The core of his being. It wasn't about me. It was about how they looked. It was about the foolishness of missing a status symbol event. I picked up the phone. My fingers were steady. I invited you, I typed. I told you it was a formal banquet. I told you it was a commander's call. You told me it was a secretary award. You told me I wasn't an officer. You chose dinner. I didn't make you look like anything. Your choices did that. I hit send. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. My mother called. This time, I answered. Hello. I said, my voice flat and professional. Eliza, honey. She was crying. I'm so sorry. We didn't know. The video, you sounded so brave. The Carter corridor, is that real? Yes, Mom. It's real. I've been doing this for years. This is just the first time someone recorded it for you. We're leaving the restaurant now, she said. We want to come see you. We can be there by midnight. No, I said. The word was easy. It didn't feel like a weight, it felt like a key turning in a lock. I'm tired. I have a shift at 0600. And honestly, I don't want to play the game tonight where you pretend you've always cared. Eliza, don't be like that, she pleaded. Your father is very upset. He's upset because he lost face, Mom. Not because he missed my ceremony. There's a difference. I hung up. I took off my uniform. I hung it up with the same care I'd used that morning. I unpinned the medal and looked at it one last time. I realized that the drawer was finally empty. I had taken everything out. Every win, every effort, every piece of my soul I'd tried to store in their house, I'd taken it back. I went to sleep and for the first time in my life, I didn't dream about them. The next few days were a whirlwind. The video went viral in military circles. I was interviewed by the base newspaper. My LinkedIn was flooded with connection requests from high-level logistics firms. My family stayed quiet for a while. They realized that the old tactics didn't work. They couldn't minimize me anymore because the world was watching. But the silence didn't last. 2 weeks later, the package arrived. It was a box from my father. Inside was the Civil War certificate. The blue ribbon from the county fair. Every report card I'd ever gotten. Every small recognition I thought had been lost in the junk drawer. There was a note. I found these. I'm putting them in a proper frame for my office. We're coming up next weekend. No excuses. We're taking you to dinner, anywhere you want. Let's start over. Dad. I looked at the pile of my own history. I felt a twinge of sadness but no joy. He was still trying to buy his way back. He was still trying to frame me into his world. I didn't answer the note. I went to work. I mentored a young airman named Chloe who was struggling with the complexity of her first assignment. She was quiet, hard-working, and felt invisible. Listen to me, Chloe, I said, sitting her down. Don't wait for them to notice. Do the work because it matters. Do it because you're the one who keeps the spear sharp. And one day, you'll realize you don't need their applause to be a hero. She looked at me, and I saw the spark of understanding. That was my real reward. I knew my family was still adjusting. I knew they were telling everyone at the club about their hero daughter. I knew Rachel was telling her friends she was so proud of her sister's military career. It didn't matter. I had found the Carter corridor for my own life. A clear path through the noise. A way to get where I was going without needing anyone else to clear the way. I stood at the window of the command center, watching the planes take off into the sunrise. I was Eliza Carter. And for the first time, that was enough. Time has a way of stretching out the truth until it's impossible to ignore. 2 months passed after that night in the hangar, and the atmosphere between me and my family didn't just change, it recalibrated. It was a slow, sometimes awkward transition from a lifetime of being overlooked to a new, fragile reality, where I was suddenly a person of substance in their eyes. But the most important change wasn't in how they looked at me. It was in how I stopped looking for myself in their reflections. The shift started with my mother. Linda began calling me on Tuesday mornings, usually when I was grabbing a quick coffee before a briefing. At first, it was the same old surface-level chatter, the weather in Ohio, the neighbor's new cat, Rachel's latest client. But then, the questions started to shift. They became tentative, like she was learning a foreign language, and was afraid of mispronouncing the words. "Eliza," she asked one morning, "how long are your shifts usually? I mean, when you were doing that work during the storm, were you eating? Did you have a place to rest?" I leaned against the brick wall of the command center, surprised by the genuine worry in her tone. "It was 48 hours straight, Mom. We had cots in the back room, but none of us really used them. There wasn't time." "I never realized," she whispered. "I always thought you were just at a desk. Safe and bored. I should have asked more. I should have been interested when you were excited, not just when the rest of the world was watching." That was the first real crack in the armor. It wasn't a grand apology, but it was an admission of neglect. I felt a small, tight knot in my chest loosen. "I'm here now, Mom," I said. "You can ask now." My father, Richard, was a different story. He didn't do emotions or admissions. He did logistics and optics. His way of acknowledging my new status was through a series of links. He would send me articles about Air Force recruitment numbers, or photos of the new F-35s, always with a brief note, "Saw this. Thought of you." He never mentioned the awards banquet directly again, but he started introducing me differently. I found out from Uncle George that at the country club, my father no longer talked about my support role. Now, I was my daughter, the staff sergeant who coordinated the rescue in the coast. He was using my success to bolster his own ego, as usual, but for the first time, he was using the truth of what I did. It was progress, albeit a selfish kind. The real surprise, however, was Rachel. The golden child had gone quiet. For weeks after the dinner at Vittorio's, the group chat was a ghost town. No wine glass emojis, no promotion updates, no snarky comments about camouflage. I heard through my mother that Rachel had been deeply embarrassed when her friends and co-workers started tagging her in the video. The comments on the post were brutal, people asking where the family was, why Eliza was standing alone in such a major moment. One evening, while I was sitting on my balcony watching the sunset over the flight line, my phone buzzed. It was a private message from Rachel. "No, hey, no, how are you? Just a photo." It was a picture of her resignation letter from the marketing firm. "I quit," the text followed. "I realized I've spent 10 years selling people stuff they don't need just so Dad would tell me I'm winning. Watching that video of you, seeing you actually do something that mattered. I felt like a fraud, Eliza. A total fraud." I stared at the screen for a long time. This was the twist I never saw coming. Rachel, the girl who took up all the space in the room, was finally feeling the vacuum of her own superficiality. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt a strange sense of shared burden. We had both been performing for a man who only valued the trophies, not the people holding them. "What are you going to do?" I typed back. "I'm going to nursing school," she replied. "I want to do something where, if I don't show up, it actually makes a difference. Like you." That was the moment the distance between us began to clarify. It wasn't that we were enemies, it was that we were both survivors of the same expectation-heavy household. I realized I didn't miss her voice in my head anymore because her voice was finally changing. She was no longer my measuring stick. She was just my sister, struggling to find her own Carter corridor. At work, my career continued to unfold with a new sense of authority. I wasn't just the person who managed the data. I was the person who understood the weight of it. My supervisor, Theodore Miller, started giving me more autonomy. I was no longer just running point, I was designing the systems. I remember walking back from a meeting with the wing commander. He had asked for my input on a new information sharing protocol between agencies. As I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking with that familiar, disciplined rhythm, I passed the hallway where the official photos were hung. There I was. A photo of me receiving the medal, shake-handing the colonel. It was a public record. It was permanent. But as I looked at it, I realized I didn't need the photo to know it happened. I didn't need my father to frame it in his office. I didn't need Rachel to be jealous of it. The value of that moment was already integrated into the way I carried myself. I had stopped translating my life into a language they could understand. And in doing so, I had forced them to learn a bit of mine. We were still a work in progress, a family built on awkward silences and tentative reaches, but the drawer was gone. The truth had stayed, and it had changed the landscape forever. The base is quietest just before the shift change. The hum of the servers in the command center is a constant, low-frequency lullaby that usually signals the end of a long day. I was standing by the window, watching AC-17 Globemaster lumber down the runway, its lights blinking against the deepening purple of the Ohio sky. I thought about the night of the ceremony. It felt like a lifetime ago, yet the clarity of that evening remained sharp. I didn't feel like a different person, but I felt like a finished person. The jagged edges of my need for approval had been smoothed out by the friction of reality. My family visited the base for the first time a month ago. It wasn't for an award or a ceremony. It was just a Saturday. My father wore his best golf shirt, looking slightly out of place among the industrial gray of the buildings. My mother carried a bag of homemade cookies, and even Rachel came, looking humbler in jeans and a sweatshirt. I took them on a tour. Not the flight line or the flashy stuff, but my office. I showed them the monitors, the data streams, the communication logs. I explained, simply this time, without apology, how the information moved from a sensor in the field to a pilot's headset. My father stood in front of my desk, looking at the dual-monitor setup. He reached out and touched the edge of the keyboard. "This is it," he asked. "This is where you did it." "The corridor." "This is it, Dad," I said. "It looks like paperwork from the outside. But from the inside, it's a map." He didn't say he was proud. He didn't say he was sorry for the secretary comment. He just stood there for a long minute, nodding slowly. "It's a lot of responsibility," he finally said. "I don't think I could do it. I like to see what I'm building." "You're building something you can't see until it's finished." It was as close to a confession as I would ever get. He finally understood that my work wasn't about the optics, it was about the outcome. And for Richard Carter, that was a monumental shift. We went to dinner afterward at a small, local place near the base. It wasn't Vittorio's. There were no white gloves or expensive Barolo. It was just burgers and fries on paper plates. We talked about the weather, Rachel's upcoming entrance exams for nursing, and the garden my mother was planning. It was a normal dinner. And for the first time, normal didn't feel like being ignored. It felt like being included. The empty chairs from the banquet were gone, replaced by the weight of their physical presence at a table I had chosen. As I look back on this journey, I realize that honor isn't something that is given to you on a stage. It's not something that arrives in a velvet box with a ribbon attached. Those are just symbols. Real honor is what you carry in the quiet moments. It's the decision to keep showing up when no one is watching. It's the commitment to excellence even when your own father thinks you're just keeping the printers running. It's the strength to invite people into your life, and the even greater strength to let them stay outside if they refuse to see you. I mentored Chloe today. She's that young airman I mentioned, the one who reminds me so much of my younger self. She came into my office, looking discouraged because her name wasn't on a list for a minor training opportunity. "Sergeant Carter," she said, her voice small. "Does it ever get easier? Feeling like you're doing all this work and no one even knows your name?" I turned away from my monitors and looked her straight in the eye. "Chloe, listen to me. Your name is on the mission. Your name is in the results. If you spend your career waiting for the people outside this base to understand what you do, you'll spend your life being disappointed. But if you do the work because the work is worth doing, you'll find a kind of peace that no one can take away from you. She nodded, and I could see the gears turning. I hope she learns it faster than I did. I hope she doesn't spend 20 years trying to translate herself for people who don't want to learn her language. The story of the lowly secretary who saved 200 lives didn't end with a broadcast. It ended with a woman who no longer needed a broadcast to feel real. My family is still imperfect. My father still talks too much about status. Rachel still has moments of intense insecurity. My mother still avoids conflict whenever she can. But they are my family. And I am Eliza Carter. We have found a way to exist in the same space without me having to shrink to fit into their drawers. I've learned that you cannot force someone to value you. You can only live in a way that makes their lack of value irrelevant. I found my worth in the Carter corridor, in the 48 hours of chaos, and in the quiet pride of a uniform that fits perfectly. If you're listening to this and you're feeling invisible, whether it's in your job, your marriage, or your family, I want you to take a breath. Look at the work you're doing. Look at the lives you touch, even in small ways. That is where your honor lives. Not in their applause. In your consistency. I'm standing firm now. And the view from here is incredible. This story taught me one fundamental truth: your value is an inherent fact, not a democratic vote. We often spend our most precious years trying to prove our worth to people who are using the wrong scale to measure us. Eliza's journey shows that true peace comes not when others finally get it, but when we stop needing them to. Whether you are in the military, a stay-at-home parent, or working a job that feels invisible, remember that the support you provide is often the very foundation that prevents everything else from collapsing. Don't let your achievements be shoved into someone else's junk drawer of indifference. Stand tall in your own dress blues, whatever they may be, and know that excellence is its own reward. I'd love to hear from you. What part of Eliza's story felt like it was written just for you? Is there a drawer in your life you're ready to empty? Leave a comment with your most meaningful takeaway, or simply comment, "Good," if these lessons resonated with your heart today. Let's keep standing firm together.